Did you know that in some medieval European towns, up to half of all transactions were done without coins? Or that the average person might go months without touching a single piece of silver? Money existed, but it wasn't the air we breathe today. Life ran on something else. It ran on trust, on skill, on reputation. It ran on bartering. We think of bartering as a primitive thing. Two farmers swapping a chicken for a bag of grain. Simple. But it wasn't. It was a complex dance of human interaction. To survive, you had to master skills we've mostly forgotten. Skills of judging character, of knowing the true worth of a thing, not just its price, of building relationships that lasted a lifetime, because your life might depend on it. Now, look at us. We live in a world of endless digital transactions. We tap a card, click a button, money flows invisibly. It's efficient, yes. But what have we lost? We've lost the connection. We argue with strangers online we'd never dare offend in person. We buy things we don't need with money we don't have. And we trust algorithms more than our own neighbors. We feel isolated despite being more connected than ever. What if the past has something to teach us? Not about going back to mud huts and feudal lords, but about reclaiming the human skills that got lost in the noise of modernity? What if the secret to navigating our complex digital world lies in the simple, profound wisdom of a medieval marketplace? Can the art of the trade teach us how to be better humans? Number 16, what happens when you know your neighbor's needs? In a medieval village, you didn't just know your neighbors, you knew their lives. You knew the baker's oven needed new stones, you knew the blacksmith's daughter was getting married. You knew the weaver was running low on good wool because a blight had hit the sheep in the next valley. This wasn't gossip, it was economic intelligence. It was the foundation of a functioning community. Survival depended on knowing what people around you needed and what they had in surplus. If you were a farmer with an excess of milk, you didn't just try to trade it for anything. You knew the candle maker needed tallow, a byproduct of your work. You knew the tanner could use the hides from your old animals. You knew the young family with a new baby could use the milk directly. Your trades were targeted. They were efficient, they solved real problems for real people, which in turn solved your problem of having too much milk. This wasn't a cold, calculated market analysis, it was a deeply human awareness. You saw a need, and you saw a way to fill it. Your success was directly tied to the success of your community. If the blacksmith's forge went cold, he couldn't sharpen your plow. If the baker's oven crumbled, there was no bread. It was a web, and everyone felt the vibrations on every strand. This hyperlocal awareness is something we've outsourced. We shop at massive supermarkets, where we have no idea who grew the food or who needs what. We order from global websites, our needs met by a faceless algorithm and a vast invisible supply chain. We are fantastically efficient consumers, but terribly ignorant neighbors. We might know our neighbor's Wi-Fi password, but we don't know if they're struggling to find affordable childcare or if their aging parent needs help with yard work. We've lost the local intelligence network, but we can get it back. It starts small. It starts by paying attention. The modern version of this skill isn't about knowing whose sheep have a blight. It's about being observant in your own community. You see a neighbor struggling to mow their lawn every weekend. You're a teenager with a new lawnmower and free time. You don't just see a chore. You see a need. You can offer to mow their lawn for a month in exchange for something they have. Maybe they're a great cook and can drop off a meal once a week. Maybe they're a retired accountant who can help you with your taxes. Maybe they can just watch your dog when you go away for a weekend. This principle extends to the professional world. A 2018 study by the business networking platform Alignable found that referrals from other local businesses were the single most effective way for small businesses to acquire new customers. This is the medieval web in action. The local coffee shop owner knows the new bookstore down the street needs a morning rush. So they offer a book and a brew discount. The bookstore owner knows the coffee shop is looking for local art to hang on the walls. She connects them with a local artist who's a regular customer. They are all understanding and serving each other's needs. They are creating a local economic ecosystem that is resilient and mutually supportive. This isn't just a business strategy, it's community building. When you understand the needs of those around you, you stop seeing them as competitors or strangers. You see them as potential partners, you stop just selling what you have, you start solving the problems you see. And that shift in perspective is everything. It changes your interactions from transactional to relational. The sociologist Ray Oldenburg wrote a book in 1989 called The Great Good Place. He talked about third places, not home first place or work second place, but places like cafes, pubs, and community centers where people connect. These are the places where local needs become known, where you overhear that someone needs a ride to the airport or is looking for a good plumber. By simply being present and aware in our communities, we can rebuild that intelligence network. The information is all there. We just have to learn to listen again. We have more data about human behavior than ever before in history, yet we seem to know less about the real immediate needs of the people living next door. If a global supply chain fails, do we even possess the local knowledge to take care of each other? As our communities become more diverse, what new challenges and opportunities arise in understanding a wider variety of needs? And the most unsettling question: has our reliance on global anonymous systems made us incapable of seeing, and therefore solving, the problems right in front of our faces? Number 15, is your reputation more valuable than your bank account? Think about a medieval stonemason. Let's call him Thomas. Thomas didn't have a website with a 5-star rating system. He didn't have a Better Business Bureau profile. He had one thing: his name. If Thomas built a wall that was straight and strong, people saw it. They talked about it. The word spread from the farmer to the priest to the local lord. Thomas the Mason builds a good wall. His name became a brand. That reputation was his most valuable asset. It was more valuable than his tools, more valuable than the coins in his purse. It was what guaranteed he would have worked tomorrow, next month, next year. Now, imagine if Thomas cut corners. If he used poor mortar or cracked stones, the wall would crumble, and just as quickly, the word would spread. Thomas the Mason builds a shoddy wall. His reputation would be ruined. No one would hire him. He couldn't just move to the next town and start over with a clean slate. News traveled with merchants and pilgrims. His bad name would follow him. In an economy built on personal relationships and trust, a bad reputation was an economic death sentence. The system wasn't formal. It was a community ledger held in the collective memory of the people. It was self-policing. You were honest and did good work, not just because of a moral code, but because it was the only way to survive. We think we've moved past this, but we haven't. We've just digitized it. Every time you rate an Uber driver, review a product on Amazon, or leave a comment on a restaurant's page, you are making an entry in a massive global community ledger. A freelancer's profile on Upwork, a host's rating on Airbnb, a seller's feedback on eBay, these are all modern manifestations of Thomas the Mason's reputation. The technology has changed, but the fundamental human principle is identical. We want to do business with people we can trust. The numbers bear this out. A 2021 survey by Bright Local found that 77% of consumers always or regularly read reviews when browsing for local businesses. More importantly, a lack of good reputation is a killer. The same survey showed that only 3% of people would consider using a business with an average star rating of 2 stars or less. Your digital reputation directly impacts your real-world income. This isn't just for businesses. In the gig economy, your personal rating determines what work you get. An Uber driver with a 4.6 rating might struggle to get rides, while one with a 4.9 thrives. The sociologist Robert Putnam, in his influential 2000 book Bowling Alone, documented the decline of social capital in America. Social capital is the value of our social networks. It's the trust, the norms, and the networks that allow us to cooperate for mutual benefit. The medieval community ledger was a powerful form of social capital. Putnam argued that we were losing this. But perhaps it hasn't been lost. So much is transformed. Our online reputations are a new and in some ways more brutal form of social capital. It's global, it's permanent, and it's often based on the opinions of complete strangers. This makes the medieval skill of reputation management even more critical today. It's not about gaming the system with fake reviews. It's about understanding that every interaction, every job, every product is a public statement about your integrity. It's about doing good work, being honest, and communicating clearly, just as Thomas the Mason did. It's about handling criticism gracefully and fixing your mistakes, because your response to a bad review is often more telling than the good reviews themselves. The medieval barterer knew their reputation was built slowly, transaction by transaction, and could be destroyed in an instant. The same is true for our digital selves. A single viral video of a poor customer service interaction can destroy a business that took years to build. In a way, The stakes are higher now. Thomas's reputation was known in his county. Our reputation is potentially known to the entire world, and it's archived forever. For building and protecting that reputation is not an old-fashioned idea. It's a vital modern survival skill. Who owns our digital reputation? If an algorithm or a malicious campaign unfairly tarnishes your name, what recourse do you have in a system with no central authority? We talk about the right to be forgotten, but can a reputation, once shattered online, ever be truly mended? And what happens to a society when the fear of a single bad review leads to a culture of bland, inoffensive conformity, crushing genuine creativity and risk-taking? Number 14, how do you barter when you have nothing to trade? A common misconception about bartering is that it was always a direct exchange of goods. A chicken for a pot, a bushel of wheat for a pair of shoes. But what if you were a young person with no land, no livestock, and no craft? What did you have to trade? You had your time, you had your strength, you had your future potential. This is the art of bartering for services, the original gig economy. In the medieval world, this was a cornerstone of society. A young man might apprentice himself to a master craftsman. He would trade years of his labor, not for coins, but for knowledge, for a skill he could use for the rest of his life. A family hit by a poor harvest might pledge their labor to a wealthier landowner during the next planting season in exchange for food to get them through the winter. This wasn't just about goods. It was about trading human potential. A singer could trade a performance at a feast for a hot meal and a place to sleep. A strong back could be traded for help fixing a leaky roof. This form of exchange was built on a different understanding of value. The value wasn't just in physical objects, it was in actions, in knowledge, in time. It was an incredibly flexible system that allowed people with no material wealth to participate in the economy. They could convert their most fundamental asset or their own effort again into what they needed to survive and eventually to prosper. It was an investment in human capital. The master craftsman wasn't just getting free labor, he was ensuring his craft would continue. The landowner wasn't just getting his fields planted, he was building a relationship of obligation and support within his community. Today, we are seeing a massive resurgence of this idea, powered by technology. The entire gig economy is a modern form of service bartering, though now mediated by money. An Uber driver trades their time and car for a fare. A freelance graphic designer on Fiverr trades their creative skills for a project fee. But we can apply this skill in a more direct, non-monetary way that harks back to its medieval roots. Time banking is a perfect modern example. It's a system where people exchange services based on time. 1 hour of your time is equal to 1 hour of anyone else's time. If you spend an hour helping an elderly neighbor with their computer, you earn one-time credit. You can then spend that credit to have someone else spend an hour teaching you guitar, or cooking you a meal, or fixing your bicycle. The concept was formalized by Edgar Chan in his 1992 book, No More Throwaway People. Chan saw it as a way to rebuild community and value the work that the traditional economy ignores, like caring for the elderly or mentoring children. There are now time banks operating in dozens of countries around the world. They are a formal system for something medieval villagers did informally every day. This skill is about looking at yourself and seeing not what you own, but what you can do. Can you teach a language? Can you fix a computer? Are you good at organizing closets? Can you offer childcare for a few hours? These are all valuable services. In a world where many people are asset poor but time rich or skill rich, this opens up a whole new field of exchange. Think of a web developer who needs a new logo. She could pay a designer a few $100s. Or she could find a talented new designer who is struggling to build a professional website. They can trade. The developer builds the designer's website, and the designer creates the developer's logo. No money changes hands, but both parties get exactly what they need. Both are richer for the exchange. This requires a mental shift. We are trained to think of our value in terms of an hourly wage, but our value is also in our skills, our knowledge, and our willingness to help. By learning to see and offer that value, we can participate in an economy of mutual support that exists right alongside the monetary one. As automation and AI eliminate more traditional jobs, will bartering for services become a mainstream economic model, or will it remain a niche activity? If 1 hour of a brain surgeon's time is valued the same as 1 hour of a dog walker's time in a time banking system, does this challenge our fundamental ideas about the value of labor? And could a large-scale service bartering economy exist without being co-opted and monetized by large corporations? Or is that an inevitable outcome? Number 13, are your possessions assets or liabilities? A medieval carpenter's most important possessions were his tools: his saw, his hammer, his adze, his plane. These were not disposable items bought from a big box store. They were often inherited from his father or painstakingly acquired over years. He kept his saw sharp. He oiled the wood on his plane. He replaced the handle on his hammer when it cracked. He did this because his ability to earn a living depended entirely on the condition of these tools. A dull saw meant more work, a sloppier cut, and a worse reputation. A broken tool meant no work at all. His tools were not just things he owned, they were assets he had to maintain. This principle applied to everything. A farmer maintained his plow and his fences. A weaver maintained her loom. A housewife maintained her cooking pots and sewing needles. In a world of scarcity, you couldn't just throw something away and buy a new one. Maintenance was a critical skill. It was a deep understanding that the things you owned required your time and energy to remain valuable. An unmaintained tool was not just a piece of junk, it was a liability. It was a drain on your future potential. We live in the opposite world. We live in a culture of disposability. Our electronics are designed with planned obsolescence. Our clothes are part of a fast fashion cycle, meant to be worn for a season and then discarded. When something breaks, our first instinct is rarely to fix it. It's to replace it. This is driven by convenience and cost. Often it's cheaper to buy a new printer than to fix the old one. We've become consumers, not custodians. We own more things than any generation in history, but we have largely lost the skills and the mindset of maintenance. The right to repair movement is a modern rebellion against this trend. It's a fight for the right of consumers and independent shops to have access to the parts, tools, and information needed to fix modern electronics. Companies like Apple and John Deere have been criticized for making their products difficult or impossible to repair by anyone but their own authorized technicians. Proponents of the right to repair argue that this is not only anti-consumer but also environmentally disastrous, creating mountains of e-waste. Legislation supporting this right has been introduced in numerous states and countries, echoing the medieval carpenter's simple wisdom: you should be able to maintain the tools you depend on. Applying the medieval skill of asset care in the modern age is a conscious choice. It's learning basic repair skills. It's buying products that are built to last, not to be replaced. It's taking the time to sharpen your own kitchen knives, patch a hole in your jeans, or change the oil in your lawnmower. The rise of YouTube tutorials has made this easier than ever. You can learn to fix almost anything with a quick search. This isn't about being cheap, it's about shifting your relationship with your possessions. This mindset extends beyond physical objects. Your knowledge and skills are your most important tools. Are you maintaining them? Are you learning new things, keeping your professional skills sharp, adapting to a changing world? Or are you letting them get dull and outdated? A professional who stops learning in a rapidly evolving field will quickly find their tools are no longer useful. Just like the carpenter, we must constantly be sharpening our saws. Our bodies are also assets. Maintaining our health through diet and exercise isn't a luxury, it's fundamental asset care. Neglecting it turns our most important asset into our biggest liability. By adopting the medieval barterer's view of possessions, we begin to see the world differently. We acquire things more intentionally, we value quality over quantity, we see the hidden costs of disposability, both to our wallets and to the planet. We become more resilient and self-sufficient, less dependent on a constant cycle of consumption. Is the right to repair a fundamental property right, or do companies have the right to protect their intellectual property by controlling repairs? If we become a society of maintainers instead of consumers, what would that do to our modern economy, which is largely based on endless growth and consumption? And as our most important tools become digital, organized, our software, our online profiles, our data, what does it even mean to maintain them? Number 12, can a good story make a lump of clay more valuable than gold? Imagine two potters in a medieval market. Both are selling simple clay jugs. They are of similar size and quality. The first potter stands silently behind his stall. The second potter, however, engages a potential buyer. He doesn't just sell the jug, he sells its story. This clay, he says, is from the riverbed just south of the old abbey where the water runs purest. I shaped it on the wheel my grandfather built, the same one he used to make the communion chalice for the village church. I fired it for 3 days with oak from the woods where the king's deer roam. Suddenly, the jug is not just a jug, it is a piece of local history. It has a lineage. It's connected to the sacred, to nature, to family. The second potter has imbued a simple object with immense value through the power of storytelling. A customer is no longer just buying a container for water. They are buying a story, a connection, a piece of the potter's life. They will almost certainly trade more for the second jug than the first. This is the art of narrative value. In a barter economy, where value was subjective and fluid, storytelling was a powerful tool. It wasn't about deception, it was about context. It was about answering the question, why is this thing special? A well-told story could differentiate your product from everyone else's. It could build an emotional connection with the buyer, which is the foundation of trust and a good trade. The history of a thing, its origin, its purpose, the skill that went into making it, all these were part of its value. We are saturated with storytelling today, but we call it branding and marketing. Every successful company in the world understands this medieval skill. Apple doesn't just sell phones, it sells a story of innovation, creativity, and elegant design. Nike doesn't just sell shoes, it sells a story of athletic achievement and overcoming adversity with its just do it ethos. These are modern versions of the potter telling the story of his clay. A 2009 experiment called the Significant Objects Project, conceived by journalists Rob Walker and Joshua Glenn, brilliantly demonstrated this principle. They bought around 200 cheap, insignificant objects from thrift stores and garage sales with an average cost of about $1.25 per item. They then asked a group of creative writers to invent a fictional story for each object. They listed these objects on eBay using the story as the item description. The results were astounding. An object bought for $1 might sell for $50. A small plastic horsehead bought for 99 cents sold for $62.95. In total, they spent about $129 on the objects and sold them for nearly $3,612. The project proved quantitatively that a narrative can create real, measurable economic value. You can apply this skill in countless ways. When you're in a job interview, you are not just listing facts from your resume. You are telling a story about your professional journey, your challenges, and your triumphs. A compelling story is far more memorable than a list of skills. If you sell crafts on a platform like Etsy, the About section is your chance to be the second potter. Tell the story of your materials, your process, your inspiration. People aren't just buying a knitted scarf, they're buying the story of the person who spent hours creating it. Even in a simple neighborhood swap, this works. You're not just trading an old bicycle. You're trading the bike I taught my daughter to ride on. It's been down every trail in this town. The object now has a history and an emotional resonance. It's more desirable. Storytelling transforms a commodity into a unique artifact. It elevates the transaction from a simple exchange of goods into a shared human experience. It answers the fundamental question, what is this thing's place in the world? In an age of digital deepfakes and misinformation, can we still trust the stories we are told about products, services, or even people? Is there a moral line between effective storytelling and manipulative deception? And how do we know when it's been crossed? As marketing becomes more personalized through data collection, are we losing a shared cultural narrative in favor of millions of individual stories designed to sell us something? Number 11. When is the right time to say nothing at all? Negotiation in a medieval market was not a rapid-fire exchange of numbers. It was a slow, deliberate process. It was a conversation, and one of the most powerful tools in that conversation was silence. Imagine a farmer wants to trade his wool for a blacksmith's knives. The blacksmith inspects the wool. He feels its texture, he notes its quality, he then makes an offer. I'll give you 2 small knives for this bundle. The farmer, instead of immediately making a counteroffer, says nothing. He simply looks at the knives, then back at his wool. He remains silent. What happens in that silence? The blacksmith's mind starts to work. Is his offer too low? Is the farmer offended? Does the farmer have a better offer from someone else? The silence creates a vacuum, and the human mind rushes to fill it. The silence puts pressure on the person who spoke last. More often than not, the blacksmith might break the silence himself. All right, he might say, 2 small knives and a hook for the barn door. The farmer has improved his position without saying a single word. This is the skill of patience and the strategic use of silence. In a world without fixed prices, everything was a negotiation. Rushing the process was a sign of desperation. A desperate person makes a bad deal. Patience signaled that you had other options, that you were not in a hurry, that you were confident in the value of what you had to offer. It also gave you time to think, to observe the other person, to assess the situation fully before committing. The best traders knew when to talk, and, more importantly, when to be quiet. Our modern world is allergic to silence. We are bombarded with noise. We get notifications on our phones every few minutes. We expect instant replies to our emails and texts. In a negotiation, we feel an overwhelming urge to fill every pause. Silence feels awkward, uncomfortable. We interpret it as a failure of communication. But it is a form of communication. It communicates thoughtfulness, confidence, and control. FBI hostage negotiators are masters of this skill. In his book, Never Split the Difference, former lead FBI international kidnapping negotiator Chris Voss talks extensively about the power of the pause. He explains that when you go silent, you give the other person a chance to think, and often to talk themselves into a better offer for you. He advises that after you make a point or an offer, you should go dead silent and let it land. The first person to break that silence will often be the one to make a concession. You can use this in any negotiation, from buying a car to discussing your salary. When a car salesman gives you a price, don't immediately respond. Just pause. Look at the number, let the silence hang in the air for a few seconds longer than feels comfortable. You might be surprised at what they say next. When a potential employer makes you a salary offer, you don't have to accept or counter immediately. You can say, "Thank you for the offer, I'd like to take a moment to consider it." The pause you create, whether it's for 10 seconds in person or a day over email, shifts the dynamic. It signals that you're thoughtful and not impulsive. This skill is not about being manipulative. It is about slowing down the process to allow for better decision making. It's about resisting the modern urge for instant gratification and immediate results. In a barter economy, a deal wasn't just a transaction, it was the start of a relationship. Rushing it was disrespectful. Taking your time showed that you valued the other person and the item being traded. By relearning the art of the patient pause, we can become more effective negotiators and more thoughtful communicators. In our digitally accelerated world, is true patience becoming a cognitive impossibility, a skill our brains are no longer wired for? How does the strategic use of silence work in text-based communications like email or messaging, where a pause can be interpreted as anything from thoughtfulness to having simply walked away from the computer? If AI-driven negotiation agents become commonplace, how will they handle the fundamentally human element of silence and patience? Will they be programmed to exploit it, or will they be unable to comprehend it at all? Number 10, how can you read a mind without asking a question? In a medieval marketplace, you couldn't run a background check. There was no credit score. The only tool you had to assess a person's honesty and intentions was your own perception. You had to learn to read people. When a trader told you his grain was from the last harvest and not the one before, you didn't just listen to his words. You watched his eyes. You observed his posture. You noted the tone of his voice. Was he relaxed and confident, or were his shoulders tense, his gaze shifting? This was a high-stakes skill. Misjudging someone's character could mean trading your healthy pig for a sickly one, or your good tools for flawed ones. It could mean the difference between a prosperous winter and a hungry one. This was the art of reading non-verbal cues. The medieval barterer was an intuitive psychologist. They understood that the body often tells a truer story than the mouth. A slight hesitation, a forced smile, a bead of sweat on a cool day, these were all data points. They were pieces of a puzzle that helped you decide whether to trust someone. This skill was honed over a lifetime of face-to-face interactions. It was learned not from books, but from experience. You learned the baseline behavior of the people in your community so you could spot when something was off. You learned to trust your gut because your gut was an advanced pattern recognition machine built from thousands of past encounters. We are losing this skill at an alarming rate. Much of our communication is now text-based. We interact through screens, stripped of all the rich data that comes from face-to-face contact. Emails, texts, and social media posts convey words, but they lack tone, facial expression, and body language. Sarcasm is mistaken for sincerity. A hastily written message is interpreted as anger. We are trying to understand each other with one hand tied behind our backs. We are becoming non-verbally illiterate. The work of psychologist Paul Ekman has been foundational in understanding this. Starting in the 1960s, Ekman identified what he calls microexpressions, fleeting, involuntary facial expressions that reveal a person's true emotion. These expressions, which last for only a fraction of a second, are universal across all human cultures. A flash of fear, disgust, or anger can betray a person's words. While Ekman's work has been applied to high-stakes fields like airport security and police interrogations, the basic principle is what the medieval trader knew instinctively: the face doesn't lie as well as the tongue does. We can consciously practice and relearn this skill. It begins with putting down the phone and having more real-world conversations. When you talk to someone, really look at them. Pay attention to more than just their words. What is their posture? Are they making eye contact? Do their facial expressions match the emotion of their words? This isn't about becoming a human lie detector. It's about gathering more data. It's about achieving a fuller, more nuanced understanding of the person you are interacting with. This skill is invaluable in any negotiation. In a salary discussion, your manager might say the budget is tight, but a lack of eye contact and a fidgety posture could tell a different story. When a client says they are happy with your work, a genuine smile, one that involves the eyes, a Duchenne's smile, confirms it, while a polite mouth-only smile might suggest otherwise. By becoming a better observer of nonverbal cues, you can better understand people's true positions, their anxieties, and their desires. This allows you to navigate interactions more effectively and build stronger, more authentic relationships. It's about listening with your eyes as well as your ears. As we spend more time interacting with avatars in virtual reality and the metaverse, will we evolve new forms of nonverbal communication, or will we lose our ability to read real human faces altogether? Can AI be trained to accurately read and interpret human microexpressions? And if so, what are the ethical implications of a technology that knows our true feelings better than we do ourselves? If we become perfectly adept at spotting deception, what would that do to the white lies and social graces that allow society to function smoothly? Number 9, what is something actually worth? In our world, a loaf of bread has a price. A gallon of gas has a price. We have a simple, universal metric for value: money. This makes transactions easy, but it also makes us lazy thinkers. We've outsourced the complex question of what is this worth to a price tag. The medieval barterer didn't have this luxury. The value of a thing was not a fixed number. It was contextual, subjective, and constantly in flux. The skill was in assessing its true, intrinsic value, not its price. Imagine a farmer with a surplus of apples in the autumn. What are they worth? To the villager who has his own apple tree, they are worth very little. To the candlemaker who needs food for his family, they are worth a few candles. To the baker who wants to make pies for the harvest festival, they are worth quite a bit more. To a traveling merchant who can take them to a city where fresh fruit is scarce, they are worth even more. The value of the apples depended entirely on who wanted them, why they wanted them, and when they wanted them. The barterer had to be a master of this. Value calculus, they had to assess an item on multiple levels. First, its utility. What can this do? How well is it made? How long will it last? A well-made chair was more valuable than a rickety one. A healthy cow was more valuable than a sickly one. Second, its timeliness. A bag of seed grain is incredibly valuable in the spring, but much less so right after the harvest. A load of firewood is worth more on the first cold day of winter than in the middle of summer. Third, its scarcity. If everyone had a good apple harvest, apples were cheap. If a late frost killed most of the blossoms, a single basket of apples could be a luxury item. This way of thinking forces you to look beyond the superficial price tag. The field of behavioral economics, pioneered by psychologists like Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, has shown just how irrational we are about value. In their 1979 paper on prospect theory, they demonstrated that people's decisions are not based on absolute outcomes, but on perceived gains and losses. For example, people feel the pain of losing $20 more acutely than the pleasure of gaining $20. The medieval barterer understood this intuitively. They knew a trade had to feel like a win for both parties. We can apply this skill by learning to question the prices we see every day. Before you buy something, ask yourself the barterer's questions. What is the real utility of this for me? Do I need it now, or can I wait? How rare is this opportunity? This can save you from impulse buys and help you make more intentional decisions. It's the difference between buying a trendy gadget that will be obsolete in a year and investing in a quality tool that will last a lifetime. This skill is also crucial for understanding your own value. In the job market, your salary is a price tag. But what is your true value to an employer? It's not just the hours you work. It's your unique skills, your experience, your problem-solving ability, your reliability. By assessing your true value, you are in a much stronger position to negotiate your worth, rather than just accepting the first price offered. You can also use this to find value where others don't see it. An old piece of furniture on the curb isn't junk, it's made of solid wood that just needs refinishing. It's a vacant lot in a neighborhood isn't an eyesore, it's a potential community garden. By learning to see the intrinsic value in things, you open up a world of opportunities that are invisible to those who only see the price. If money were to suddenly lose its value in a major economic collapse, how would we even begin to relearn the skill of assessing intrinsic worth on a mass scale? As our economy becomes more service and information based, how do we assess the intrinsic value of intangible goods like data, an algorithm, or a piece of digital art? Can an object have true value if no one desires it? Or is value purely a social construct, a collective agreement we can change at will? Number 8. Why is a broken deal better than a bad one? Picture a medieval weaver who has spent months creating a beautiful, intricate tapestry. A wealthy merchant comes to her stall and offers to trade a large quantity of imported spices for it. Spices are valuable and rare. It seems like a good deal. But as they talk, the weaver gets a bad feeling. The merchant is pushy. He dismisses the quality of her work. He seems shifty. Her instincts tell her something is wrong. In that moment, she has to make a choice. Does she take the seemingly good deal and ignore her gut feeling? Or does she walk away, even though it means she has no trade for the day? The skilled barterer knew that walking away was one of the most powerful moves in a negotiation. Like it was the ultimate expression of self-worth and confidence. It sent a clear message: I know the value of what I have, and I would rather have no deal than a bad one. A bad deal wasn't just a poor economic outcome. It could be the start of a bad relationship. It could damage your reputation if you became known for accepting lowball offers. It could leave you with goods that were not what they seemed. The weaver knows that if the spices turn out to be old or of poor quality, she will have lost her masterpiece for nothing. The short-term gain was not worth the long-term risk. This is the skill of knowing your walk-away point, or what negotiation theory calls your bottom best alternative to a negotiated agreement. This concept was popularized by Roger Fisher and William Ury in their 1981 book, Getting to Yes. Your botna is your plan B. It's what you will do if you fail to reach an agreement. The stronger your botna, the more power you have in the negotiation. If you have another merchant who is also interested in your tapestry, you can negotiate with confidence. If you know that you can sell the tapestry for a fair price at the next market, you don't feel desperate to sell it today. If your only alternative is to have no sale at all, your power is much weaker. But even then, no sale is a valid alternative. The medieval weaver's botna might simply be, I keep my beautiful tapestry and wait for a better offer. In our modern lives, we often feel pressured to say yes. We are afraid of missing out. We take the first job offer we get because we're afraid another won't come along. We agree to a client's unreasonable demands because we're afraid of losing their business. Either we buy a product on sale because the limited time offer creates a false sense of urgency. We fail to define our walk-away point. Learning to say no and walk away is a deeply empowering skill. Before any negotiation, you should know your limit. What is the lowest salary you will accept? What is the highest price you are willing to pay? What are the conditions you are not willing to compromise on? Knowing this in advance prevents you from making an emotional or desperate decision in the heat of the moment. This is not about being stubborn or difficult. It's about respecting yourself and the value of what you bring to the table. When you are willing to walk away from a bad deal, people respect you more. They see that you are not a pushover. Paradoxically, being willing to walk away often makes the other party more willing to meet your terms. They realize you are serious and that they might lose the opportunity altogether. The weaver who turns down the pushy merchant might find him coming back a few minutes later with a more respectful attitude and a better offer. He now knows she is a savvy trader who cannot be easily intimidated. How has the fear of missing out, FOMO, amplified by social media, crippled our collective ability to walk away from bad deals, whether they are social, professional, or consumer? In a globalized economy with seemingly endless options, does having too many alternatives, a paradox of choice, make it harder or easier to define a clear walk-away point? Can we teach AI to understand the concept of a botna, and what happens when two AI agents negotiate with each other, both programmed with a perfect understanding of their own best alternative? Number 7. How can a farmer, a weaver, and a blacksmith all trade at once? Bartering wasn't always a simple two-party exchange. Life was more complicated than that. Imagine a farmer has a pig, but he needs a new door for his house. The carpenter, however, doesn't need a pig. He needs a new set of tools. The blacksmith has the tools, but he doesn't need a door. He needs a pig to feed his family. In a simple two-party system, no trade can happen. Everyone is stuck. This is where the medieval barterers' creativity came into play. They understood the art of the multi-party trade. The farmer, the carpenter, and the blacksmith would all get together. The farmer would give the pig to the blacksmith. The blacksmith, in return, would give the new set of tools to the carpenter. The carpenter would then build the new door for the farmer. Everyone gets what they need, and the pig, the tools, and the door all end up in the right hands. This required communication, trust, and a flexible, creative approach to deal-making. It was economic problem-solving at its most fundamental. This skill also extended to delayed trades. The farmer might give the pig to the blacksmith today, with the understanding that the blacksmith will provide him with new plowshares in the spring after the iron ore arrives with the merchants. This required a long-term view and a high degree of trust. It was an economy built on promises and social credit. These complex deals were not written down in complicated contracts. They were sealed with a handshake in the presence of witnesses. The entire community was the enforcement mechanism. We tend to think in very linear, two-party terms. I have money, you have a product, we make a direct exchange. But the principle of creative deal-making is a powerful skill we can reintroduce into our lives. It's about seeing the bigger picture and connecting needs and resources in unconventional ways. In the business world, this is often called strategic partnering. A small software company might not have the money to pay for a big advertising campaign. An established magazine might need to improve its online presence. They can make a creative deal. The software company provides the magazine with technical expertise to build a new website or app, and in exchange, the magazine provides the software company with free advertising space. No money changes hands, but both companies get something they desperately need to grow. This is the multi-party trade in a modern context. On a personal level, this can be a lifesaver. Maybe you need help moving into a new apartment, but you can't afford to hire movers. Your friend has a big van, but is too busy to help you load and unload. Another friend is strong and has free time, but no vehicle. You orchestrate a multi-party deal. You promise to cook a big thank you dinner for both of them. So the friend with the van drives, the strong friend helps you lift the boxes, and you provide the meal. Everyone contributes what they can, and everyone benefits. This requires a shift from what can you give me to how can we solve this problem together. It's about being a facilitator, a connector. It's about looking at a network of people, your friends, your colleagues, your local community, and understanding the web of their needs and their surpluses. When you can see those connections, you can start to weave them together into deals that benefit everyone involved. This is a highly valuable skill both professionally and personally. People who can do this are natural networkers and problem solvers. They create value out of thin air, simply by making connections that others don't see. As our economic and social systems become more complex and interconnected, are we becoming more capable of creative, multi-party solutions, or are we becoming more trapped in rigid, bureaucratic silos? Can blockchain or other distributed ledger technologies create a new trustless system for facilitating complex, multi-party, and delayed trades on a global scale? What happens to the social fabric when the trust required for these deals is outsourced to a technology rather than being vested in human relationships? Number 6, do you know how much you are really worth? Before a medieval craftsman could even begin to barter, he had to master a foundational skill: honest self-assessment. A potter had to know with absolute clarity the quality of his own work. He had to know if his pots were well fired, if his glazes were even, if his designs were desirable. He couldn't afford to be delusional. If he overvalued his work, no one would trade with him. He would be seen as arrogant or foolish. If he undervalued his work, he would be cheated. He would trade away hours of his skilled labor for far less than it was worth, and his family would suffer for it. This wasn't about ego or humility, it was a practical economic necessity. He had to know his own worth in the context of the marketplace. He would look at the work of other potters. He would listen to the feedback from his customers. He would honestly assess the time, skill, and materials that went into each piece. He had to find the delicate balance between confidence and realism. This deep understanding of his own value was the starting point for every single negotiation he entered. Without it, he was lost. In the modern world, this skill is both more difficult and more important than ever. We are constantly bombarded with conflicting messages about our worth. Social media presents a curated highlight reel of other people's successes, which can make us feel inadequate. The corporate world often tries to commodify our labor, reducing our unique skills to a line item on a budget. It's easy to develop an inaccurate picture of our own value. Some people suffer from imposter syndrome, a term coined by psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes in 1978, feeling like frauds despite their accomplishments and constantly undervaluing themselves. Others might have an inflated sense of their own abilities, leading to disappointment and conflict. The medieval potter's method of assessment is still the best one we have. First, look at the market. In a professional context, this means researching salaries for your role, your industry, and your location. What are other people with your skills and experience being paid? Websites like Glassdoor and LinkedIn have made this information more transparent than ever. Second, listen to feedback. This means being open to constructive criticism from managers, mentors, and peers. It also means paying attention to your results. Are your projects successful? Are your clients happy? The outcomes of your work are a direct reflection of its value. Third, honestly assess your inputs. How much time, effort, and unique expertise do you bring to the table? What skills do you have that are rare or in high demand? This isn't a one-time exercise. The market changes, your skills evolve, your value is not static. A skilled barterer was constantly reassessing his worth based on changing conditions. A blacksmith who learned a new technique for working with steel was suddenly more valuable. At a farmer whose crops survived a drought when others failed saw his value skyrocket. Similarly, you must constantly be aware of how your value is changing in the modern marketplace. Knowing your worth gives you the confidence to ask for what you deserve. It allows you to enter a salary negotiation with a clear, well-researched number in mind. It helps you price your freelance services fairly. It gives you the strength to walk away from an offer that is beneath you. It also keeps you grounded. If you know your work isn't yet at a premium level, you know you need to focus on improving your skills rather than demanding a higher price. Honest self-assessment is the antidote to both imposter syndrome and delusion. It is the foundation of a successful career and fair exchange. How can we teach the skill of accurate self-assessment in an education system that is often focused on standardized tests and grades, which can give a skewed picture of a person's true abilities? In a gig economy where work is increasingly broken down into small, temporary tasks, is it becoming harder for individuals to build a coherent sense of their overall professional worth? And what happens when AI can assess our skills and productivity with cold, hard data, presenting us with a true value number that might conflict with our own sense of self? Number 5, how do you turn too much into just enough? Every farmer in the medieval world faced the same two great challenges, scarcity and surplus. Scarcity was the obvious, terrifying threat of a bad harvest, of not having enough to survive. But surplus was a challenge too. If you were a sheep farmer and all your ewes had healthy lambs in the spring, you suddenly had a surplus of wool and meat. This was a good problem, but it was still a problem. Wool could rot, meat would spoil. A surplus, if not managed properly, could quickly turn into waste. The skilled barterer was a master of managing surplus and scarcity. When they had a surplus, they didn't panic. They saw it as an opportunity. The sheep farmer with too much wool knew that this was the time to make big trades. He could trade for things that would last through the winter. He could trade his perishable wool for durable goods like iron tools from the blacksmith, clay pots from the potter, or a new table from the carpenter. He was converting his temporary abundance into lasting value. He might also use his surplus to build social capital, giving some away to a neighbor in need, knowing the favor would be returned in the future. When faced with scarcity, the skilled barterer became resourceful. If a drought meant he had little grain to trade, he couldn't simply stop participating in the economy. He had to find other sources of value. Perhaps he could trade his time and labor, helping another farmer whose fields were in better shape. Perhaps his wife was a skilled weaver and they could trade textiles instead of crops. He had to be adaptable and creative, understanding that value could be found in many forms, not just in his primary product. Our modern consumer society is built on the idea of creating and selling surplus. But as individuals, we are often terrible at managing it. We have closets full of clothes we don't wear, garages full of things we don't use. We have a surplus of possessions, but we often fail to convert it into real value. At the same time, many of us experience scarcity in other areas, a scarcity of time, a scarcity of meaningful social connections, a scarcity of financial security. We can apply the medieval skill of managing surplus and scarcity to our own lives. Start with your surplus, go through your home, and identify everything you have in excess. Old books, electronics, clothes, furniture. These are not junk, they are assets waiting to be traded. You can use platforms like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, or local buy nothing groups to trade these items for things you actually need. You are converting your cluttered surplus into useful value, just like the sheep farmer. You can also trade your surplus skills or time. If you have a surplus of free time on weekends, you can trade that for something you lack. When you face scarcity, think like the resourceful barterer. If you're short on money, a scarcity of cash, what do you have a surplus of? Perhaps it's a skill, you can barter your graphic design skills for accounting services. Perhaps it's a physical asset. You can rent out your spare room on Airbnb. The key is to see your life as a portfolio of different assets: time, skills, knowledge, possessions, relationships. When one is scarce, you can leverage the others. This mindset fosters resilience. A person who is solely dependent on their job for money is vulnerable. If they lose that job, their source of value is gone. But a person who understands all their sources of value, their skills, their community connections, their possessions laws, is much more adaptable. They can weather the periods of scarcity by creatively leveraging their periods of surplus. It's a more holistic and sustainable way to think about personal economics. Our global economic system is incredibly efficient at producing surplus, but also creates massive waste and inequality. What medieval principles of surplus management could we apply on a global scale to address issues like food waste and resource distribution? As automation creates a potential surplus of human labor, how can we as a society convert that into new forms of value rather than letting it become mass unemployment? Does the very concept of scarcity, which drives much of modern economics, become obsolete in a future of advanced robotics and AI? And what would an economy of pure abundance look like? Number 4, are you a craftsman or just a laborer? In the medieval world, there was a profound difference between being a general laborer and being a master craftsman. A laborer could offer his strength, his time. This had value, but it was a commodity. There were many strong backs available. A master craftsman, a skilled blacksmith, weaver, or carpenter offered something much rarer: expertise. His skill was the result of years of apprenticeship, practice, and dedication. He could create things of quality and durability that no one else could. This mastery of a tangible craft gave him immense power in a barter economy. People sought him out. They were willing to trade their best goods for his work. His skill was his security. As long as people needed well-made horseshoes, sharp plows, and strong hinges, the blacksmith would never go hungry. His craft was a durable store of value, more reliable than a lord's favor or a good harvest. It was something he owned completely. No one could take his skill away from him. It was a part of him. This pride and tangible skill created a culture of quality. Craftsmen were identified by their work. Their reputation was on the line with every object they created. This wasn't just a job, it was an identity. This stands in stark contrast to much of modern work, which can be abstract, digital, and disconnected from any physical outcome. Many of us work on spreadsheets, in meetings, or on small parts of enormous projects, never seeing or touching a finished product. This can lead to a sense of alienation and a lack of pride in our labor, a concept Karl Marx wrote about extensively in the 19th century. We are, however, seeing a powerful resurgence of this medieval value system in the modern maker movement. People are flocking to learn tangible skills like woodworking, pottery, knitting, and brewing. Websites like Etsy have created a global marketplace for handcrafted goods, allowing modern artisans to make a living from their craft, much like their medieval predecessors. This movement is a reaction against the mass-produced, disposable culture we live in. People are rediscovering the deep satisfaction that comes from creating something real and useful with their own hands. Mastering a tangible craft is a powerful form of modern bartering skill. It gives you something to trade that is always in demand. Even if you have an office job, having a practical skill on the side makes you more resilient. If you know how to repair bicycles, you can trade that skill with your neighbors. If you are a talented baker, your bread has real value in your community. If you are a skilled gardener, you can trade your surplus vegetables. These skills allow you to step outside the formal monetary economy and engage in direct community-based exchange. Developing a craft also changes your relationship with the material world. You start to appreciate the quality and effort that goes into the things you use every day. You become a more conscious consumer. You'd rather have one well-made, handcrafted table than 3 cheap, particle board ones. You are reconnecting with the physical reality of value. The process of mastering a craft also teaches valuable life skills, patience, attention to detail, and problem solving. It takes a long time to become a good woodworker. You will make mistakes. You will have to learn from them. This process builds character and resilience in a way that many modern jobs do not. Whether you do it for a living or as a hobby, mastering a tangible skill is a way to reclaim a part of your humanity that has been lost in the digital age. As 3D printing and advanced manufacturing become more accessible, what is the future of traditional handmade crafts? Will they become even more valued for their human touch, or will they be rendered obsolete? In a future where AI can generate flawless art and design, what does it mean to be a master craftsman? Is the value in the final product or in the human process of creation? If more people were engaged in tangible crafts, would this lead to a more environmentally sustainable society, or would it just create a new wave of resource consumption? Number 3, what's more important, the deal or the relationship? When a medieval farmer traded grain to the village miller, it wasn't a one-time transaction with a stranger. It was an interaction with a man he would see every week for the rest of his life. Their children probably played together, their families might attend the same church. If the farmer tried to cheat the miller by putting rocks in the bottom of the grain sacks, he wouldn't just lose a customer. He would gain an enemy. He would be ostracized. His reputation would be ruined. Conversely, if the miller consistently gave the farmer a fair portion of flour for his grain, a bond of trust was formed. This relationship was the true currency of the medieval economy. The goal of a barter was not to win the negotiation by getting the absolute maximum for yourself in a single deal. The goal was to build a strong, long-term relationship based on mutual benefit and trust. A good trade was one where both parties felt they got a fair deal and were happy to trade with each other again. This focus on the long game was essential for survival. You needed a network of trusted partners. You needed the blacksmith to be willing to fix your plow in an emergency. You needed the midwife to be willing to come to your house in the middle of the night. These relationships were your social safety net. They were built one fair trade at a time. Our modern transactional culture often loses sight of this. We are encouraged to be shrewd negotiators to squeeze every last drop of value out of a deal. We interact with anonymous call center employees, faceless online sellers, and a rotating cast of service workers we will never see again. In this environment, there is little incentive to build relationships. The focus is entirely on the short-term outcome of the single transaction. This can lead to a feeling of isolation and a breakdown of trust. The skill of prioritizing the relationship over the deal is a powerful antidote to this. It's a conscious choice to play the long game. In business, this means treating your customers, suppliers, and employees fairly, even when you could get away with less. A business that builds a reputation for fairness and integrity will attract loyal customers and dedicated employees. Research by Frederick Reichhold, published in his book The Loyalty Effect, showed that even a 5% increase in customer retention can increase profitability by 25% to 95%. Loyalty, which is the result of a strong relationship, is incredibly valuable. On a personal level, this skill transforms how you interact with your community. Partnering with a neighbor. Don't try to get the best of them. Aim for a trade that feels fair and generous to both of you. The goal is not just to get your lawn mowed. The goal is to build the kind of relationship where you can count on each other in the future. You are not just trading services, you are building social capital. This requires empathy. It requires you to put yourself in the other person's shoes and understand their needs and their perspective. It means sometimes taking a slightly worse deal today to ensure there will be more deals tomorrow. It's the difference between a zero-sum mindset where one person's gain is another's loss and a positive-sum mindset where you work together to create more value for everyone. This approach is not weak or naive, it is profoundly strategic. In a world that feels increasingly fragmented and anonymous, people who know how to build lasting, trust-based relationships have a tremendous advantage. They have a network of allies, they have a community. Can true long-term business relationships be built in a purely digital environment, or do they require some form of face-to-face human interaction? As corporations increasingly use complex algorithms to set prices and manage customer service, are they systematically destroying their ability to form genuine relationships with their customers? If a society's economy becomes overwhelmingly transactional rather than relational, what are the long-term consequences for social cohesion and trust? Number two, can you make a deal without a deadline? In the medieval world, time moved at a different pace. It was governed by the rising and setting of the sun, the changing of the seasons. There was no instant communication, no overnight shipping. This pace of life was reflected in the art of negotiation. A good deal was not something to be rushed, it was something to be cultivated. A negotiation might start with a casual conversation at the market, continue over a pint of ale at the tavern a week later, and only be concluded after both parties had time to think, consult with their families, and assess their needs. This was the art of the slow negotiation. Rushing was a sign of weakness or deception. If a trader was pressuring you to make a deal right now, it was a red flag. What was he trying to hide? Why the urgency? A skilled barterer was comfortable with letting a potential deal breathe. He knew that time was a tool. It allowed emotions to cool. It allowed for better ideas to surface. It allowed both parties to feel more confident and comfortable with the final outcome. Their patience was not just a virtue, it was a core negotiating tactic. A deal struck in haste is often a deal repented at leisure. Our modern world is built on speed and urgency. For a limited time only, sale ends today. You have 10 minutes to accept this offer. We are constantly being pushed to make fast decisions. This pressure is intentional. It's designed to short-circuit our rational thinking and trigger an emotional, impulsive response. When we are rushed, we are more likely to make mistakes, overlook important details, and agree to terms that are not in our best interest. Reclaiming the skill of slow negotiation is a radical act of self-defense in this environment. It's about having the confidence to say, I need some time to think about this. It's about refusing to be pressured by artificial deadlines. When you are buying a car and the salesperson says the special price is only good for today, your best response is often, that's a shame. If you change your mind, here is my number. You are taking back control of the timeline. This applies to all areas of life. When you get a job offer, it's standard practice to ask for a few days to consider it. This gives you time to fully evaluate the offer, compare it to others, and perhaps negotiate for better terms. When a contractor gives you a quote for a home repair, don't feel pressured to agree on the spot. Get multiple quotes, take your time to review them. The process of slowing down leads to better decisions. The slow negotiation is also about relationship building. When you take the time to talk, to understand the other person's needs and constraints, you move from an adversarial posture to a collaborative one. You are not just trying to win a deal, you are trying to solve a problem together. This can lead to more creative and mutually beneficial outcomes. Perhaps there is a solution that neither of you had considered, one that only emerges after a long, thoughtful conversation. This skill requires patience and the ability to tolerate ambiguity. You have to be comfortable with the deal not being closed immediately, but the rewards are immense. You make better deals, you build stronger relationships, and you protect yourself from the manipulative tactics of a world obsessed with speed. As AI becomes capable of conducting negotiations at lightning speed, will human beings be able to compete, or will we be forced to cede all important negotiations to our machine proxies? Is our brain's capacity for slow, deliberate, rational thought being permanently eroded by a digital environment that rewards instant reaction and emotional engagement? Can a global economy that runs 24/7 ever learn the value of slowness, or is the demand for speed an irreversible force? Number one, can you adapt when the rules change overnight? The medieval world was not a stable place. It was a world of sudden, unpredictable change. A drought could wipe out the crops, a new tax from the local lord could drain a village's resources. A plague could sweep through, changing everything in a matter of weeks. The value of goods was in constant flux. The barterer who thrived in this environment was not the strongest or the richest. It was the most adaptable. Imagine a farmer who has built his entire livelihood on growing wheat. A sudden prolonged rain ruins the entire crop. A rigid farmer would be destroyed. But an adaptable farmer would pivot. He would see that the wet ground is now perfect for raising ducks. He would notice that the reeds are growing thick along the river, perfect for basket weaving. He would trade his labor, his tools, or his remaining livestock for what he needed to start a new venture. He didn't just have one skill, he had the meta skill of learning and adapting. He understood that what was valuable yesterday might be worthless tomorrow, and what was worthless yesterday might be the key to survival today. This was not just about being flexible, it was about being a keen observer of a changing world and having the courage to act on those observations. This skill of adaptability is arguably the single most important skill for navigating the modern age. The pace of change today is faster than at any point in human history. Entire industries can be disrupted and made obsolete in a decade by new technology. The job you have today might not exist in 15 years. The knowledge you acquired in college can become outdated with shocking speed. A global pandemic can change the rules of society overnight. A financial crisis can alter the value of everything we own. We are living in a modern version of the medieval barterer's unpredictable world. The adaptability of the medieval barterer offers a powerful model. First, it requires continuous learning. The adaptable farmer was always learning about weather patterns, about different types of livestock, about local needs. In the same way, we must become lifelong learners. According to a 2017 report by the McKinsey Global Institute, up to 375 million workers globally may need to switch occupational categories and learn new skills by 2030 due to automation. Being adaptable means constantly updating your skill set, not just once at university. Second, adaptability requires a diversified portfolio of value. The farmer who only grew wheat was vulnerable. The farmer who also had chickens, a strong back for labor, and a wife who could weave was much more resilient. Similarly, we should not rely on a single source of income or a single skill, but developing a side hustle, learning a practical craft, building a strong community network. These are all ways of diversifying your personal value, making you less vulnerable to shocks in any one area. Finally, adaptability requires a change in mindset. It's about letting go of the idea of a stable, predictable life and embracing a state of constant evolution. It's about seeing change not as a threat, but as an opportunity. The ruined wheat crop was a disaster, but it was also the opportunity to start raising ducks. The loss of a job is a crisis, but it can also be the opportunity to start a new career or your own business. This is not easy. It requires courage and a high tolerance for uncertainty. But it is the fundamental survival skill for a world that refuses to stand still. The medieval barterer knew that the only constant was change. We must learn that lesson again. Can our education systems, which are largely based on a 19th century model of front-loading knowledge, be reformed quickly enough to produce truly adaptable, lifelong learners? As change accelerates, we may reach a point where the time it takes to learn a new skill is longer than the lifespan of that skill's usefulness. What happens then? And the ultimate question, is there a limit to human adaptability? A rate of change so fast that our biological and psychological systems simply cannot keep up, leading to a society-wide breakdown.